In this video, I'm going to show you how to use weeds as management indicators. If you want to be a low-cost, low-risk, profitable regenerative grazer, this is for you. This process will transform your farm to a weed-suppressive, high-functioning perennial grassland. I will cover soil surface conditions for weeds, how to use each weed type as a management indicator, how to design safe-to-fail trials to create the soil surface conditions you need, and at the end I'll cover the impact of spraying herbicide and multi-species cover crops for controlling weeds. Weeds are not indicating what is wrong with our soil. They are not nature's healers. They are indicating that our management is producing a soil surface that weeds need to germinate and establish. I will start this series with how grazing produces the conditions for annuals and forbs. Examples are thistles, capeweed and barleygrass. To set the scene, weeds cost Australians over $5 billion per year. Very few have been eradicated or controlled. And as everyone knows, the current approach to weeds results in herbicide resistance. When I first started managing our own property, there was a long list of problems. Animal health and performance, costs increasing, too little or too much rain, and weeds. All this while fitting in farm work around full-time work and starting our family. I am sure this sounds familiar. With this many problems, I decided to focus on one thing, thistles. In the late 1980s, the best advice was to spray the thistles with MCPA at the rosette stage. What I found was that sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. It was clear that spraying was not changing the conditions that promoted the germination and establishment of thistles. I assumed someone would have solved this problem. This started my search for farmers that had controlled thistles. At the time, dairy farmers were thought to be the best grazers in the world. My first question to every dairy farmer I met was, how do you control thistles? All the ones I asked and visited said that they sprayed with herbicide. This made me realise that I would have to work this out for myself. So I started looking for places and properties where thistles could be but were not growing. What I noticed was that they were not usually in tree belts, roadsides and old stockyards. This was interesting as well as confusing. Confusing as I had heard and read that too much rest caused thistles. To sort this confusion, I started running my own safe-to-fail trials. Patterns started to form. Then during the 1990s, Jody Butterfield and Allan Savory told me that weeds move in when the habitat suits their germination and establishment. Weeds move out when the habitat no longer suits their reproduction. Jody also told me to manage for what I wanted, not what I didn't want. I had already worked out that I needed dense perennial grasslands. My trials had shown that dense perennial grasslands didn't suit thistles. After more trials, I finally understood how to control thistles. It was clear that weed control comes from changing management to stop producing the soil surface that favoured thistles. To change the soil surface at a profit, you need to change the combination of recovery, stock density and plant utilisation. Further trials allowed me to group weeds into two main types. This grouping simplified what the weeds were indicating about my management. You need to know this so you can adjust your management to always have weed suppressive, healthy perennial grasslands. To be healthy, perennial grasses need to recover between each grazing. If recovery is too short, they keep drawing on their root reserves and not growing litter. Over time, these root reserves decline. And then the root mass shrinks and the litter ground cover disappears. This creates the habitat that annual weeds and forbs need to germinate and establish. What I found was that recoveries too short resulted in thistles. This was the first weed type, forbs and annuals. This was also when I developed Allan Savory's definition of recovery further. Perennial grasses are recovered when they look like an ungrazed plant and contain fresh yellow litter. For woody plants, the mechanism was more complicated. Again, Allan Savory provided the understanding. Perennial grasses are one of the few plants that cannot drop their leaves. Selective grazing grass plants produces enough litter in the base of these plants to choke their growth points. These smothered grasses turn grey and start to die. This creates the habitat for the woody plants to germinate and establish. This was the second weed type, woody plants. So this led to the two main weed habitats idea, annuals and forbs at one end and woody plants at the other end. This allows you to design coherent, safe-to-fail trials. For annuals and forbs, design trials with increased recovery. For woody plants, design trials with a focus on clearing growth points. Next, I will cover how to carry out safe-to-fail trials to determine that combination that you need for your farm. In complex situations like farming, evidence is required, not advice, to make your farm resilient and suppress weeds. As mentioned earlier, this video is part of a series, but in case you need to act now, I have provided a weed cheat sheet in the link below. Healthy perennial grasslands have dense grass plants with large bases. And in between those bases, you've got 100% ground cover from decomposing litter. The steps I take to work out the management you need for this are, in 3 to 5 very small areas, I use a range of recoveries at high stock density and plant utilisation to see the trends. For example, we use 6 months, 12 months and 24 months recoveries. Stock densities of 1 sheep per square metre or 1 cow per 3 square metres, combined with high plant utilisation of greater than 80%. This provides evidence of how your land reacts to management that mimics the Great Migration. This stock density is above the threshold that germinates perennial grasses and pushes litter onto the soil. Litter in contact with the soil starts decomposing, doubling your nutrient cycling. These recoveries ensure litter grows and perennial grass bases increase. Annuals and forbs are the easiest weeds to control through management. The solution is simple. Allow your better perennial grasses to reach full recovery before grazing. This will reduce erosion while increasing water infiltration and nutrient cycling. Next is a breakdown of 2 commonly recommended practices for weed control. Both are high cost and high risk and don't directly increase perennial grass health. Spraying annuals and forbs rarely makes sense as most are due to die shortly. Most people that spray tell me that they must do this to stop them seeding. Some even tell me the rhyme, 1 year's seed, 7 years weed. This approach only makes sense if you change your management to change the soil surface health. If not, spraying ends up becoming an annual activity. The soil is full of long-lived viable seeds. Dr. Ian Lunt's research counted the number of viable seeds in the soil. The number of weed seeds is unimaginable. One paper has the range of viable silvergrass seeds between 3,000 and 15,000 per square metre. These seeds last longer than the research reports. Another year's seed makes little difference to the total. It is inefficient to try and control weeds by stopping them seeding. If you are cash cropping, multi-species cover cropping is critical to maintain ground cover, or as my friend Gabe Brown would say, soil armour. Gabe states that cover cropping only makes money and sense if you are cash cropping. He uses perennial grasses for grazing. Gabe is clear, do not replace perennial pastures for cover crops. Covers can increase ground cover and weed control, but only if they are managed for long-lived litter. Long-lived litter requires covers with high carbon-nitrogen ratios that are not grazed until they have matured. Many are designed for animal performance and are grazed when too young. Many over-harvest their cover crops, resulting in shifting the soil surface back to bare ground. This management will not produce stable weed-suppressive soils. The next question I get is about the idea of plants like tillage radish for compaction. Alan Williams, in a YouTube with James Rebanks, compares root pressures. Fine fibrous roots from healthy perennial grasses exert twice the pressure of tillage radish. He also says that mycorrhizal fungi exert 10 times the pressure of tillage radish. Perennial grasses form much stronger and longer lasting relationships with these fungi than annuals. This makes perennial grasses the perfect host to build healthy soil over time. A lot of advice does not address the need to change management and soil surface health. Make sure to trial advice before implementing highly promoted practices, as many work but very few are low cost, low risk and profitable. That's all I've got for this video. As a recap, I covered: it is management that creates the habitat for weeds. What do weeds indicate about your management? The two main weed types: annuals and forbs from recoveries too short at one end, and woody types from not clearing perennial grass growth points at the other end. Safe to fail trials to find the recovery, stock density and plant utilisation that creates dense perennial grasslands. And finally, the value of spraying and multi-species cover cropping on weed control. To me though, the big takeaway from this video is, in nature, there is no such thing as invasion by a species. There is only colonisation of habitat. Thanks again to Jody Butterfield and Allan Savory from the Savory Institute. Links to materials and how to book a free call are below. The Laneways video has tips on infrastructure that makes this weed control convenient. In the next video, I'll show you how to manage woody plants. See you on the next one.